What word would you use to describe Tennessee's quarterback situation as compared to other teams that have realistic championship hopes? I broke this down on offthehooksports.com. Would love for you to take a look at that. So let's go ahead and begin, because I think when compared to other teams, that Tennessee is in pretty good shape among those that have realistic championship hopes. So, Caleb, you came up with the teams that I looked at and their quarterback situation and what they had coming or coming back in 2023. We all know Tennessee has Joe Milton, which is pretty nice. If you got to have a new quarterback, Joe Milton's about as good as it gets because he's got ability and he's got experience. Most teams aren't going to have that. Today's tough question brought to you by Craft Treats. Go to crafttreats.com, use a promo code Off the Hook. That's Off the Hook. Get 20% off the CBD treats or the non-CBD treats. I love the CBD treats because they'll help with your pet's digestion issues, maybe arthritis, maybe anxiety as well. So let's talk about the teams you picked out that have to replace a quarterback, Caleb, that you believe have a realistic shot of winning a national title. Tennessee being one, the others are.
The others are Georgia, which who's going to object to that?
Nope, not me.
Alabama, again, who's going to object?
Not me.
And Ohio State, who's going to object?
Not me.
Which we talked about the other day. Those are the three best rosters in college football without a quarterback. Like, they're just loaded everywhere. And then I threw in, and just to be fair, I threw in Penn State. Now, I don't know how realistic you think it is with Penn State, but, they were 11-2 last year. And I think it's very clear that outside of Michigan and Ohio State, Penn State is the clear-cut third best team in the Big Ten. And it's a huge drop-off after that.
Agreed. Let's break some of these down. So, first of all, let me ask you today's tough question brought to you by Craft Treats. How would you describe Tennessee's quarterback position heading into the season? And I know you've read about the other teams and you have a working knowledge of them anyway, but how would you describe it compared to the other programs we talked about? I would say it's in the top 2 or 3 that we're going to break down. I would use the term desirable.
I would use the term stable. Which is very important because
which is actually a weird word to talk about a new quarterback, but it is stable.
It is. We know what we know the bottom at least of what we can expect from Joe Milton. We don't know the ceiling, but we know the bottom. And so Tennessee, we know the bottom, we don't know the ceiling. And so Tennessee is in a pretty good situation that they got a quarterback who started the last 2 games of the year, was MVP of the Orange Bowl, started the first 2 games of the year before, has started, I think, 10 games in his college career. So, if you're breaking in a new quarterback, it has started 10 games in his college career, 4 in this system. So it was hard to consider them a team that's breaking in a new quarterback, even though we all agree they are, because we all agree that Hendon Hooker was really this. If you were to say who was Tennessee's quarterback in 2022, you would say Hendon Hooker. You wouldn't say Joe Milton. And so I think that I know it's funny. We go back to 98. People compare Joe Milton to T. Martin a lot. I don't see that comparison as much, only because I think we know a lot more about Joe Milton than we knew. And I don't think people knew that much at all about T. Martin going into 98.
No, I agree. So I think the first one we look at is Georgia, and you have Carson Beck. Now, I know a lot of Georgia fans are on this channel, and I don't want this to sound as like a shot at Georgia because it's not. But I think just to say Stetson Bennett is going to be replaced by Carson Beck and you're all good to go is a little bit too easy of a statement to make. I was not high on Stetson Bennett heading into last season. I was not high on Stetson Bennett throughout his career. I thought it was a great story. But Stetson Bennett was Mr. Clutch last year. So what do you make of Carson Beck replacing Stetson Bennett? How does that affect Georgia's championship hopes? From all that we've heard, Carson Beck is a fantastic player, maybe with more ability than Stetson Bennett. What do you make of that situation?
I'm really mixed on this because the one thing about Stetson Bennett is he knew his limitations, so he didn't make a lot of mistakes. And I actually think because Carson Beck is a better player, I think he'll try to play a little bit more. Can you use the word hero ball in football? I know that applies in basketball, but is it apropos to use it in football?
What does hero ball mean? Does that mean like you're Steph Curry and you're just
so in basketball, hero ball is like, yeah, you try to take over the game. You try to take over the game, and I could see Carson
like
Beck
LeBron in the finals when he was with the Cavs and
when he had to take over the game because he didn't have a choice.
Yeah. And they were playing Golden State. They ended up losing, but they were incredibly outmatched and shouldn't have even gotten there. Okay, I see what you're saying. I don't think Beck's going to play hero ball, but if he does, that would be a huge, stupid mistake.
Right.
If he would do that.
Yeah, and so I'm of the mindset of I could see him being a little prone to that where Stetson Bennett wasn't. But at the same time, the reason I have a hard time saying it's trouble for Georgia is because usually a guy like Stetson Bennett that leads a team to a national title, that's kind of that game manager, does what he needs to do, has great intangibles, and kind of is a good leader. I didn't get that from Stetson Bennett. I got kind of arrogant, cocky. I got A.J. McCarron vibes from Stetson Bennett. And the thing with A.J. McCarron was he had poor intangibles, but it really didn't matter because Alabama was just that loaded that they were going to win those national championships anyway.
Okay, so Georgia's situation better or worse than Tennessee's?
The quarterback situation is worse, but their situation overall, but it's less important. Put it that way for them.
Agreed. We've talked a lot about Alabama's quarterback situation. Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson battled it out. Got a little tip that it may end up be Simpson in the end, but quarterback Tyler Buckner comes in from Notre Dame. I think we would both agree that Tennessee's quarterback situation is better than this. They couldn't find a guy they believed in, so they had to go out and get a guy that hasn't proven very much, and I don't think they know who they're going to play in the fall.
No, I don't think they have any idea. And unlike Georgia, Alabama was a good quarterback away from being 8-4 or 7-5 last year. And that's a big deal, guys. So I think Alabama's a little more. I know Nick Saban is going back to, people say he's going back to his old ways with Tommy Rees as offensive coordinator. I'm not so sure there's a lot of data that really backs that up. I'm not so sure that Tommy Rees is. I don't think that necessary. I think we're overhyping the idea that they're doing what George is doing. But I will say that I think he needs a quarterback more than Georgia does, and he doesn't have a quarterback. And notice they were not as desperate as Georgia was in the portal. Georgia wasn't desperate at all. And so I agree. This is a worse situation.
And what do you make of Ohio State and Penn State? We can address Penn State. I don't know that they're really a championship contender, but people in Pennsylvania are probably saying the same thing about Tennessee. But Ohio State is going to be a championship contender, and C.J. Stroud is a pretty hefty, good player to replace.
Yeah, but they've how many times would we since Urban Meyer took over? How many quarterbacks has Ohio State replaced at this point from Braxton Miller, J.T. Barrett, Cardale Jones, Justin Fields, and now oh gosh, my mind's drawing a blank. C.J. Stroud. I believe isn't Kyle McCord kind of the guy that's their next man up for them? I will say this. I think Kyle McCord might be a little overrated. I don't know if Kyle McCord fits this system, quite honestly. I think that this is from everything I've read, he's a pure, more pro-style drop-back passer. Dwayne Haskins, that was the other guy I was thinking. I think that Kyle McCord may not have the mobility to run the spread that they need at Ohio State. So I think that they think they're fine, but I don't think they are fine.
Agreed. Of that group, I think you would make you could make a strong argument that Beck and Georgia are in a better position in replacing quarterbacks because let's remember Joe Milton did get benched. I mean, we all seem to think he's just going to be the next Hendon Hooker, but we don't know that. And I think you could make that argument for Beck. I don't know that any of the other quarterback situations of these, as we call them, championship contenders, are even close to Tennessee's stature right now and what they expect in the fall.
I agree. Yeah, I don't think any of them are close. I think, again, Ohio State fans would tell you they're close, but I don't think they are. And the one guy to watch out for, though, and I know you're a little more skeptical of him than I am, but, Drew Aller for Penn State did actually play pretty well in mop-up duty last year. Kind of a Joe Milton situation where he wasn't too bad in mop-up duty. So I don't think there's as much of a quarterback controversy there as people think. I think it's one of those, you've covered teams. How many teams have you covered where they say there's a quarterback controversy, but they've got a starter and they have their starter?
Yeah. That most of the time they know exactly who's going to start. As a matter of fact, if there were any question, the only time I can really remember is Lane Kiffin coming out and saying that Jonathan Crompton is the starter, and that was to help his shattered confidence at that point.